Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, if you can go ahead and grab your food and settle down. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and start the program in about 2 minutes. Again, I request the brothers that are grabbing their food to go ahead and grab it. Inshallah, go ahead and grab a seat. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started in about 2 minutes. Just keep an eye. I mean, if anyone slide you open. No, you may not need to.
Then how do I go there?
Go to slidio.com. Here. Yeah. Or just scan the QR code. Or just go to the link. It should work.
The link is not clickable. It's reading.
Working for me. No. I don't think so.
Sure.
So if you can just keep an eye on the questions for me and tell me.
Yes.
Everyone can enter in their questions.
No, but I can read it. Just send something. ये लिखे
10 लिखा उन्हें करेक्ट कर दिया. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, if you were about to go ahead and start the program, I ask all of you, if you have any questions throughout the program, you can go ahead and just go to this particular link that's on my screen, and you can go ahead and ask your questions in real time. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and try to answer them afterwards or throughout the presentation as I get them. Again, if you just go to slidio.com, and then the meeting ID is 4556385. With the entire presentation, it's 30 minutes. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. For those that don't know me or those that are online, my name is Tabriz Ahmed. And I have my own accounting firm, which is actually just down the street here from ISNS Masjid. Many of you may know me. I'm also here on the board of directors as the fundraising director for the ISNS Masjid. But today, inshallah, I'll be speaking about tax savings as we approach the end of the year, in particular through charitable giving to ISNS Masjid or any masjid for that matter, right? So as accountants and as attorneys, before we give any type of presentation, we put out a lot of disclaimers, right? Disclaimer is, again, whatever we talk about today, it's not tax advice, it's not legal advice, it's just general information, right? We go ahead and just tell you to take the information for what it's worth And if there's anything related particularly about your situation, to go ahead and reach out to me or your accountant or seek professional advice. Right? Again, the information here is not endorsed by ISNS or anyone. There's no one liable. Again, it's just general information. Again, I'd mentioned this earlier. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and just type your questions online at slidio.com and go ahead and put in the meeting ID 4556385. And then you can go ahead and just ask questions, and you can also go ahead and see any questions that the entire audience is asking as well. Again, you can go ahead and scan the QR code that's on the screen, or just go to slidio.com, put in the meeting ID 4556385. So what are we going to go ahead and talk about today? Right? So inshallah, I don't imagine the presentation to be more than about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll leave some time for Q&A as well. Right? We're going to go ahead and talk about some facts and assumptions as it relates to the IRS tax code and how it works in terms of itemizing and standard deductions. We'll talk about a strategy called bunching multiple years. We'll talk about how cash donations work in general, stock donations, how those work. There's a program called Invest in Kids, right? And then we'll also talk about RMDs and QCDs, which is a qualified charitable distribution for those that are of age that take out money from their 401k in retirement. And then we'll briefly touch base on some advanced strategies related to DAFs, right? DAF stands for a donor advised funds or private foundations, or what we call in the accounting world CRTs or CLTs, which is a charitable remainder trust or a charitable living trust. Right, and then also renaming your IRAs at the upon your death. And we'll talk about how much you can go ahead and donate from the IRS tax code. So some facts and assumptions, right? Fact, many of you may already know this, but you can only deduct donations if you itemize on your tax return, right? So what does that mean? You itemize on your tax return if you file a Schedule A with your personal tax return, right? What is a Schedule A? How do you itemize? Well, you itemize if you go above the standard deduction, which for single filers is $13,850, or for married individuals who file a joint tax return is approximately $28,000, right? So if your deductions go over those two particular numbers, then you actually itemize, then only will your donations be any advantageous to you in saving taxes, right? So how do you itemize? What do you include in itemization, right? Again, simple stuff. The three main things that most 95% of people itemize is property taxes and state income taxes, right? Unfortunately, due to President Trump a few years ago, the max we can go ahead and deduct in that category is $10,000, right? Second item is if you own a primary house and you have a mortgage on it, the interest on that primary house is tax deductible. That is part of your itemized deductions, right? And the third thing, which is what we're here today to talk about, is charitable giving or donations, right? So if you add up those three particular categories, and if they go over the $13,850 or the $27,700, then you actually do the itemized deductions, right? If you don't, then there are certain ways that you could go ahead and get above that number, right? So bunching multiple years into one particular year, right? So let's say that you are a homeowner and then you do pay property taxes and state income taxes and you're a married individual, but when you add up those three and you add up all of your donations that you give throughout the year, it only comes up to $25,000, right? Well, let's say, again, let's just use some easy numbers. Let's say that your property taxes and state income tax is $10,000, your mortgage interest is $10,000. If you add up those two, that's $20,000. And let's say you give $5,000 of donations throughout the entire year, right? That's $25,000. If you remember from the previous slide, I'd said for a married filing individual, $27,700 is the limit. Well, those $5,000 in donation yield you zero tax benefit, right? So one thing you can go ahead and do is you can advance pay your 2024 donations into 2023 before the end of the year. So now if you give another, let's say on an annual basis, you and your family give $5,000 in donations, right? Well, if you give $5,000 of donations every year, those donations will yield you zero benefit. But if you take your 2024 donations, bunch them together with 2023, now at least in 2023, you go over the itemized deduction or the standard deduction of $27,700, and now your itemized deduction is $30,000. So now those donations, if you combine the 2 years of donation into 1 year, now they will help you, right? So between the 2 years, you'll yield greater benefit. So the first year, you'll go ahead and do itemized deductions. The next year, you may or you may not give donations of another $5,000 because you've already bunched up your 2024 donations with 2023. So in 2023, you take an itemized deduction of $30,000, and then in 2024, you just take the standard deduction, right? So that's what we call bunching up multiple years into one. Some people will go ahead and do this over a 2-year period, a 3-year period, right? So you could go ahead and do it in any one of the ways. So does the first strategy make sense? Any questions on that? Right? No, you cannot go back previous year. It's only for carry forward, right? So your 2024 donations, you can give it before December 31st, and then that would qualify.
Instead of bunching upcoming year, future year, we can just increase the current year's donation to meet the threshold?
You can, again, which is what's called bunching, right? Or just give enough, give more this year. I mean, the entire point is give more to ISNS or any other masajid, so you are able to go ahead and take advantage of those donations, right? So how do donations actually work?
Is there a limit how many years you can go ahead?
No, there's no limit, right? I mean, it's 60% of your AGI, right? Adjusted gross income. We'll talk about that later, what that means, right? So how do donations actually work? When people say you get a tax break, what does it really mean, right? Let's say you're a family whose husband and wife both work and your annualized income is about $200,000, right? So what that means is the highest tax bracket that you'll be in is 24% at the federal, right? A lot of the things that we're going to talk about is just federal stuff, right? There's one thing that we'll talk about, state of Illinois, but today we're talking about the 24% is a federal tax bracket, right? So if you donate, again, we're going to go make the assumption that you're already doing itemized deductions. So if you increase your donations by $10,000 and your itemized deduction increases by $10,000, what that means is you will pay $2,400 less in taxes, right? Again, what that means is when you file your tax return, you will get $2,400 extra in your tax refund, right? That's the crux of the matter. That's how tax law works, right? So your taxable income gets reduced, which has an impact on how much taxes you pay, right? So that's just how donations work. Another thing might be, hey, you might be at the crux of the 24 and the 22% tax bracket. So by you giving $10,000, you're actually not only saving $2,400 in this particular example, but you might also reduce your overall tax bracket from 24% to 22%, right? So that could be another aspect.
So how we can find whether we donate or not? Because we don't do any track unless we are getting the tax.
Correct.
Different organizations. How can we find out?
Well, so again, so the question is, how do you know how much you've donated? Only you know how much you've donated, or the organization send you your receipt, right? I tell all my clients, regardless if you get donation receipts or not, you need to go ahead and keep a tabulation throughout the year, just an Excel spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, or in a hand piece of paper, how much you've donated. Even if you drop in $20 in the Sadaqah box on Friday, keep a note of it, right? Because a lot of people think, oh, you know what, if I go ahead and write down my donations, or if I take a tax deduction, it's going to reduce my barakah from my donations. That's incorrect, right? Unfortunately, one of the facts that we know is our tax dollars are being used to bomb our brothers and sisters overseas, right? So you should go ahead and do everything that you can do within legally terms to go ahead and reduce the amount of taxes you pay, right? Another thing, if you pay extra taxes in America, it doesn't make you more American. It doesn't make you a better US citizen than me, right? Right? Our former President Trump, when asked, hey, how come you don't pay any taxes? He said, because I'm smart, right? That's why he doesn't pay any taxes. And he's got a lot of highly paid and skilled accountants and attorneys, right? But the matter is, I always tell clients, because I have a lot of clients, oh, I don't want to deduct my zakat because I don't want to go ahead and reduce the benefit from my zakat, right? Inshallah, Allah Ta'ala will go ahead and give you whatever reward you're destined to have from your donations, right? But if those donations can help you save on taxes and get you a bigger tax refund, do it. You don't want that money? Take that money and give it back to Islamic Relief, Heroic Hearts, ISNS, whoever, right? But take that money.
Yeah, one question. So let's say I give 100 here and there, and in the end it amounts to 1,000 or 2,000, right? But I don't have receipts for like whatever I put in the box or whatever, right? And then always this fear is there that if I get audited,
yep.
what will I show as a receipt, right?
So great question. Just to go ahead and repeat the question. The brother asked, you're saying, hey, I give $10, $100, $50 throughout the year to various different masajids in cash, and no one sends me a receipt, right? So at the end of the year, that tabulates to a certain dollar amount of $1,000, $2,000, which helps me save on taxes. If I get audited, I don't have a donation receipt. What do I do, right? So the IRS tax code says if you donate less than $250 to a certain organization, you do not need any receipt, right? So one thing you can go ahead and say, you could say, hey, I donated $240 to 10 different organizations, and now there you have your $2,500 deduction. But make sure you donate the $240 in cash to 10 organizations, right? So again, the answer is, if you have less than $250 to one organization throughout the year, you do not need any receipt. So that's how you get through your audit. The max is, again, there's no limit. You can go ahead and give 100 organizations. We've had clients, unfortunately, that didn't have receipts, that had to audit. One of the ways we had to go ahead and do is we just went through and we found every single masajid, right, that he'd went to, and he said, yeah, I think I've donated to that. I think I've donated to that. 100, 100, 100, 200, 300, 240, and get certain limits off of there.
Is it a good practice to do that? That's a question.
Again, I'm not here to give tax advice. I'm just telling you how it works, right? Consult your own tax advisor on that, right? So cash donations, right? But what's better than cash donations is stock, right? Appreciated stock, right? What does that mean, right? So let's say, again, if you donate stock or a real estate or land or a townhome or rental property, right? So in our example, let's say you bought 100 shares of Amazon in 2012. I looked it up. In 2012, Amazon was about $10 a share, right? Let's say you bought that, right? And then now Amazon's worth, as of Friday, it was worth $148 per share, right? Let's just make it easier. Let's say $150 per share, right? So your 100 shares, you paid $1,000 for it. Now they're worth $15,000, right? So one way you can go ahead and do it in the previous slide, if you donate cash, how do you donate cash? You have to sell that stock. You have to pay capital gains of up to 20%, depending on your tax bracket, right? And then you take that cash and then you give it to the masajid, right? That's option one. Option two is you can go ahead and just call Zishan, myself, Ghafoor, and say, hey, I want to go ahead and donate 80 shares of my Amazon stock directly to ISNS or any other masajid, right? So what happens is you will go ahead and transfer that appreciated stock directly to the charity. Therefore, you avoid capital gains tax and you get a tax deduction, the fair market value of that particular stock, right? So again, in the example, if you donated that entire Amazon stock, you don't pay $2,800 in capital gains and you get a $15,000 tax deduction, right? So it's much better if you have, or let's say you held on to a land or right? You had some land investment that you bought 30, 40 years ago, some farmland for $10,000, now it's worth $100,000, right? You want to come and you want to donate $50,000 to the masjid, but you're going to pay huge capital gains on it. If you give that particular land to the masajid or any public charity for that matter, right? The masjid sells it, pays zero tax, takes that money and keeps it and puts it into the construction of the masjid. You get the tax break because you donated a non-cash value. You paid zero capital gains, right? So you could do this with publicly traded stock, rental homes, land, anything, right? But essentially the thing here is we want to avoid paying capital gains. The way you avoid paying capital gains is you donate appreciated stock that's already there so you don't have to pay capital gains on it, right? So again, you save capital gains tax, you get the donation, and the masjid gets the money by selling it, or they keep onto the stock for longer term and appreciates even more, right? So again, this is all federal. Again, for those of us that are here Illinois residents and those that are on YouTube that are Illinois residents, there's actually a program in the state of Illinois called Invest in Kids, right? This particular program has nothing to do with the federal government. It's a strictly Illinois-based program, right? So what this program is, it doesn't help ISNS, unfortunately, and many of the other masajids, but it helps our Islamic schools, right? CPSA, IFS, MEC, Al-Aqsa, Al-Huda Academy in Schaumburg, right? Just to name a few, right? So the way this particular program works is you want to go ahead and donate $10,000. Your children go to IFS, your children go to CPSA, and you want to donate, support the school, right? Again, not ISNS. So we also support other organizations as well, right? So CPSA, you want to go ahead and give a $10,000 donation. But instead of giving that $10,000 donation, if you gave the $10,000 donation as an option 1 or option 2 that I talked about earlier, you just get, again, how much tax savings do you get if you're in a 24% tax bracket on $10,000 donation? $2,400, right? That's the max you could go ahead and get, assuming you itemized and everything. If you avail this particular program and give that $10,000 to CPSA, you can get $7,500 cash back on your tax refund. 75%. No tax deduction at the federal level will give you a 75% cash back guarantee, right? Again, the way the program works is, again, it's strictly for schools, private schools. You go through what we call a scholarship granting organization called SGOs, right? One of them that I've used over the past several years is Empower Illinois, right? And you go ahead and give them a $10,000 donation. You say, hey, you could say it's $5,000 for CPSA, $2,500 is for MEC, $2,500 is for IFS. They'll go ahead and allocate it. The schools get notification that Muhammad Khalil has given $10,000 to you and broken it up in such fashion. The school applies for it and gets that money. Again, there's some administrative fees and all that. But again, the crux is MEC, CPSA, IFS get majority of that donation. You get a certificate from the state of Illinois. So on nothing to do, again, with federal income tax, on your state income tax, you get $7,500 cash back, right? Assuming you owe that much in liability. If you don't owe that much in liability, then you get, if carried forward, the next year and the next year and the next year, right? So the bad part is, unfortunately, this particular program, the state of Illinois last week voted against it, so it will no longer renew after December of 2023, right? It's something that our former governor had started 5 years ago. Unfortunately, it was a pilot program, which has been running great, but unfortunately, the current Illinois government chose not to renew it. So again, this is a particular program. If you want to support our Islamic schools, I highly, highly recommend this, right? Because there's no tax deduction out there that gets you 75% donation, right? So again, you have to go ahead and make the deduction before December 31st. You have to go ahead and register. You have to inform the state of Illinois that you're doing it. So they give you, so again, there's certain steps. If you want to participate in this particular program, I urge you to go ahead and do it right away, because there's maybe at least about 1 to 2 weeks of legwork that needs to happen, because you have to contact state of Illinois. They mail you a certificate and a code and all that. right? But it's something that you could still go ahead and do before December 31st, right? For our elders, QCDs. What is QCDs, right? If you're of my age that you're nowhere near retirement, don't worry about this, right? Mashallah, if you're like Mahmoud uncle, who's mashallah already in retirement, this impacts you, right? QCD, what is QCD? So if you're over the age of 70 and a half, right? At the age of 72, the IRS requires you to go ahead and have RMDs, which is required minimum distributions from certain of your retirement accounts, right? But starting age 70.5, what you could go ahead and do is you could go ahead and take those distributions without withdrawing it, say, hey, call Fidelity, Charles Schwab, wherever Amana, your retirement account is held, and say, hey, I want to go ahead and give a donation directly to the Masajid from my retirement account, right? So that helps in several different ways. One, it takes care of your RMD, required minimum distribution requirements, right? Because if you don't withdraw a certain amount and the government mandates you do it, they penalize you for not withdrawing out of your retirement in a timely manner after the age of 72, right? So again, one, it satisfies your RMDs. Two, let's say, again, you want to go ahead and just give $5,000, and if you donate $5,000 in cash, you're just going to be within that standard deduction, right? So that $5,000 would yield you zero benefit had you given it in appreciated stock or cash donations. But if you go through QCDs, it has zero impact on your standard or itemized deductions. Why? Because it already reduces it from what we call above AGI, your taxable income, right? So you could still take the standard deduction and take this $5,000, $10,000 deduction through giving it through your QCD, through your retirement, right? And not only that, let's say, again, you're on Social Security benefits or you get Medicare, whatever the case may be, by giving directly from your QCD, you reduce your AGI, which a lot of these other government programs are mandated on, your property taxes, right? To go ahead and get the senior citizen exemption or the senior freeze, your AGI has to be below a certain level, right? By giving donations directly from your QCD, you're reducing your taxable income at the top, right? Which is, again, so it has many other benefits outside of just benefiting you on taxes because it helps in various different ways, right? But unfortunately, again, only a subset of our community qualifies for it to go ahead and do this, right? Now let's talk about some advanced strategies, right? So that's something anyone can go ahead and do. This is actually something anyone can go ahead and do, right? I have a lot of clients that say, DeBraze, I want to go ahead and donate to ISNS next week at the fundraiser, but can I go ahead and pay it in Ramadan and get a tax deduction before December, right? Unfortunately not, right? Because you have to go ahead and give the money to ISNS or any other masajid before December 31st, unless you use a DAF. Does anyone know what a DAF is? A donor advised fund. No one in this crowd? Right? So a DAF, donor advised fund, what is it? Right? So again, in that particular, because mashallah, we want to go ahead and give during Ramadan to go ahead and get the extra reward and multiply it multiple times, which is great, right? But you want the tax deduction. So you want the best of both worlds. How do you do it? You have to open up a DAF, right? So a DAF is a donor advised fund, right? Which can go ahead and, so again, this will assist you in bunching as well, right? What is that, right? We talked about bunching earlier, right? But basically a donor advised fund is, let's say again, you want to pay, as I mentioned, in Ramadan, which is in March, inshallah, right? But you want the tax deduction today. So you go to Fidelity, Schwab. It's very cost effective. It's maybe less than $100, $200 to open up a DAF, right? And it's an investment account that you control. So the moment you put money, $5,000 into this particular account that you control, the IRS gives you a tax break, right? So let me repeat that. The minute you open up a DAF and you put money into a particular DAF account, the IRS gives you that deduction. Remember, the money has not gotten to ISNS or the Masjid yet, right? It's still in your control. You still have complete, you want to give it to IFS, Heroic Hearts, ISNS, whoever, you could do that in Ramadan, but you get the tax break today. What happens is, again, that money, once you put into a DAF, you control it, but you can't take it out, right? It has to go to a 501c3 at any time. It doesn't have to be at Ramadan. You could do it. I have clients that put in money into a DAF every single year because they want it to continue growing because it grows tax-free in it until it gets to a certain dollar amount, and then they want to go ahead and fund a particular project, right, through their own private foundation, or there are many different things people go ahead and do, right, for capital projects, right? But the most simplest way is, hey, I want to go ahead and, so remember, earlier we said you can go ahead and bunch, so this helps you bunching as well, right? You want to go ahead and you give, let's just say, $10,000 between Darussalam, their fundraiser is next week as well, right? Darussalam, ISNS, IFS, right? But you don't want to give it all to them right now. You want to give it all to them in Ramadan. So you open up the DAF, you put your money into the DAF, comes in Ramadan, you go ahead and distribute it to all the organizations, but you take the tax deduction right now. Again, the assets within the DAF grow tax-free. So again, if that $10,000 by Ramadan becomes $12,000, great. You already took a $10,000 deduction. ISNS and Darussalam or whoever will go ahead and get the $12,000. You could choose who you want to give it to, when you want to give it to, right? So a donor advised fund, very simple. Anyone can open it up. You could just go to Charles Schwab, Fidelity, any one of the big ones will go ahead and do it. The only thing I caution you about is Sharia compliant. Again, because once you put in the money, depending on where they're investing it, it may not be Sharia compliant, so you'll have to figure that out. Again, I'm telling you from a tax perspective, but just look into it, right? What's another thing? Private foundation or small NFPs, right? So a lot of us, mashallah, send money overseas for zakat, sadaqah, support our family, friends, neighbors in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever it may be, right? But unfortunately, the IRS doesn't give you a deduction on that, right? Because it's not a 501c3 organization here in the United States, right? So what do? Right? So one thing you can go ahead and do is you could set up a private foundation or a small NFP that you and your family. So one thing you'll go ahead and know is, mashallah, all these high net worth families all have a private foundation. The Bill Gates Foundations, the Melinda Gates Foundation, right? The Pritzker Family Foundation. All these families have some sort of family foundation, right? So they just put money into their family foundation, and then they go ahead and, many of them actually, I was just reading about the Rockefeller Family Foundation, right? Each one of their family members, every child has a family foundation, right? And they do a lot of many different things with it, right? But today's is, again, you could open up a family foundation, a private foundation, and say, hey, you could tell the IRS, I want to send money to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to support the poor, help out the poor and the needy, help out the orphans, right? And the government will let you do that. You just have to go through it the proper vehicle, right? So you open up a private foundation whose mission is to go ahead and support orphans in India, right? You go ahead and donate to your private foundation, your small NFP. Now that NFP, again, there are certain regulations. You have to make sure you have documentation, meeting minutes. You're not just giving it to your family or sending it overseas for money laundering issues, right? But as long as you follow the criteria, you can get that tax break, right? So I always tell clients, our Jewish brothers and sisters exploit the tax law in so many different ways, right? And we as Muslims don't do that, right? I'm afraid of the IRS. I'm afraid of getting audited. Oh, I rather not take the tax break. It's going to reduce my barakah. I say no, right? Again, do everything properly. If the IRS or the government gives you certain loopholes, use it. Be like Trump and say I'm smart and not pay any taxes, right? Again, but all these have cost associated with this, right? So you have to figure out, is this, if you just send $1,000 to your family, this may not be the proper thing for you to do. But if you're sending $1,000 a month, it might be something to look into, right? Because that's $12,000 a year, right? There's certain, if you're less than $50,000 for the year, the government asks almost literally zero questions, right? It's literally, the annual filing is a 3 questionnaire. That's it. Check boxes and you're done, right? So there's certain things that you can go ahead and do. As you want to grow your family foundation, then you can go ahead and give more, right? You want to support education. We have clients that want to go ahead and support education of other people in India, Pakistan. You could use these avenues to do it, right? And get that tax break, right? You can even pay yourself out of your own foundation for working in that foundation as compensation, right? So you put money in, you get a tax break, and you can pay your wife, your kids, whoever it may be, for doing certain things within that foundation. Again, as long as it's being work and it's reasonable, the government allows it, right? So this is, again, as, yes. It's tough. Again, the question is based on what's the minimum threshold of someone wanting to go ahead and donate based on what it costs, right? Every single, unfortunately, I'd say consult your tax advisor. But again, it's usually, I'd say anywhere between, give or take about $10,000, $15,000 is my gut, right? Because to go ahead and set up a small foundation and pay the government filing fees will cost you just alone on the setup a few $1,000s, right? The annual filings and everything might cost you a few $100 to $1,000, maybe even more depending on the size of your organization, right? So I'd say a minimum of 10 to 20,000, then it's worth it, right? Because you're going to pay me or you're going to pay any other accountant to go ahead and prepare it. You have to pay the government filing fees. You got to pay the Secretary of State, IRS, to go ahead and set up the account, potentially have bylaws. You need an attorney, right? So it's available. It's just, again, so the other thing I'll go ahead and tell you is people say, well, at the Braves, don't you have something simple, right? I mean, if you want to save on taxes, then unfortunately your tax situation has to be somewhat complex, right? How does Trump not pay any taxes? You think he has a very simple tax return? No, right? He's got all these foundations and LLCs and this and that. So you have to spend money to save money, right? You can't say, well, I don't want to pay any costs. Well, unfortunately, then you're just going to do it, right? So again, I'd say a minimum of $10,000 to $20,000. Again, so the question is, we're sending money to our extended family. Again, depends on why you're sending money. Again, if I was also a family member living next door to you, if I contacted your foundation and say, hey, you're supporting orphans and educations, can I also get money? Again, so you have to have an application. It can't just be, hey, I'm randomly, willy-nilly send money to my family overseas. Again, there's a certain process you have to follow, procedures, potentially applications for scholarship. So again, there are certain things that you have to follow, right? Again, today's is just, I just want to tell you there's stuff out there, right? Now it's your job, if this is something that you're interested in, explore. Talk to your accountant, talk to your tax advisor, talk to your legal advisor, right? Do research on it, then see, is this worth it for you, right? Again, today it's just, there's a lot of stuff out there. Just look into it. It's not as simple as it may seem, right? This is, again, as you get more advanced, there's something called charitable remainder trust and a charitable lead trust, right? So what is this? You may say, hey, at the Braves, I have this rental property. I've had it for all these years. I want to go ahead and, mashallah, all my kids are doctors. They're married. They have their own lives. They don't need this money after I pass away, but I want to go ahead and give it to the masjid, but I still want to go ahead and I need the income from my rental property because I'm still living and that's my daily source of income as it stands today. Okay, so what you could go ahead and do is you could potentially set up a charitable remainder trust, right? So where the charitable remainder trust is, again, let's say you have some stock or you have, again, the easiest example is a rental property, right? You own a rental property and you want to give it to the masjid upon your passing, right? But you want to do it today, but you want the rental income and you need the rental income. So you open up a CRT, a charitable remainder trust, and you put that asset within that trust. And what that trust says is, as long as you're alive, the person that put in this particular asset can go ahead and get benefit from this asset and receive the income of this asset. So I can get the rental income on a monthly basis for a period of 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, or for the rest of my life. You could say for my life and my wife's life. You could say for my life and my wife and my children, whatever you want, right? You could distinguish in any way. After that period is done, then the asset that remains within that trust goes to the public charity or the 501c3, right? So upon your passing and your wife's passing, you could go ahead and say that this particular rental property, because I don't need the rental income anymore, I need the sadaqah jariyah, so therefore transfer this asset into the masjid's name, right? And the masjid, you could go ahead and also dictate in there to the masjid, hey, look, I don't want the masjid to sell it, but I want this to be a waqf, and have the masjid use the rental income for their operations. So inshallah, it sustains you and gives you sadaqah jariyah forever, inshallah, right? So that's one option, charitable remainder. So after your life, whatever is remaining within that trust goes to the charity. Now you could do the reverse. You could say, hey, Tabriz, I don't need the money right now, right? I'm doing good on Social Security, but I don't want this particular asset, and I don't need the income, but my kids will need the asset after I pass, right? I don't want to give the asset of it. So you could set up a charitable lead trust, right? So again, it's the reverse of a charitable remainder trust, which says, again, you fund the trust with the cash or the asset, right? The charity gets the monthly rental income for a period of years or until your life, right? And then after your passing, that asset comes back to you, right? It doesn't go back to the charity. So the asset comes back to your children, whatever, right? Again, in both of these scenarios, again, there's a long calculation, but the minute you go ahead and put that asset, your rental home or your publicly traded stock into this CRT or CLT, you get the tax deduction today, right? Again, what we're talking about is how do you reduce your taxes today, right? So by opening up a CRT or a CLT and putting assets in there, you get the tax deduction today, and you could still get income up until you're alive, and upon your passing, it's gone, right? What are we going to, we take nothing when we're dead. So these are all different options, right? The last thing, again, is, again, upon passing, one thing you can go ahead and do, in particular to your traditional IRAs, many of us have traditional IRAs that we've had all throughout the years, right? Is one thing you may not know is upon your passing, you list your children as beneficiaries. When your children get that traditional IRA upon your passing, they have to pay income taxes on that inherited asset at the children's income tax rate, which could be potentially high, right? What you could go ahead and potentially do is say, hey, look, I want this particular IRA upon my passing to go to ISNS, IFS, Darussalam, whoever it may be, right? Then there's no taxes, right? Because the 501c3s pay no taxes. Every penny of your donation will go towards the masjid. The government doesn't get anything, right? Because you may say in your will, hey, children, you get this, but I want a certain portion of my assets to go to the masjid, right? But if the children inherit it, they cash it out, and then they give the money to the masjid, well, the government's getting a subset of that money, right? Because why? Your children first inherited it, then they cash it, then they give it to the masjid. So instead of the children inheriting it, if you say, hey, directly go from IRA to ISNS, then you bypass the children, then you don't have to pay any taxes. Your children don't pay any taxes, right? You could even go in there as far as saying, hey, I want the IRA to go to the 501c3 for a certain number of, we just talked about charitable remainder trust, right? Or charitable lead trust, saying, hey, I want the income from this rental property to go to my children, and then after my children's passing, you can have it, right? So you could even do that, right? So I think we're almost done here. In terms of someone asked me a question, how much can you go ahead and donate, right? 60% of your AGI, right? AGI is adjusted gross income. So if you make $100,000 after all of your whatever deductions that you may have above the line, right? Not itemized deductions, you could give away up to 60% if it's a public cash donation or check donation, right? If you're donating stock, it's 30% of your AGI, right? And if you even donate beyond 60% or 30%, whatever is remainder, you can actually carry that forward that for 5 years into future years, right? I'm done. Again, shameless plug. Again, we all know ISNS fundraising dinner is next Friday. We're doing the construction. So again, not just ISNS, but many other masajids are needing of money. So inshallah, whatever you can go ahead and give before the end of the year, do it and save on taxes. Right? There's my contact information. You can reach out to me for any advice or in your particular situation. But if we have general questions, you can go ahead and put it on Slido, and you can go ahead and type in your questions for those that are online, or you can go ahead and just raise your hand here. Yes.
Question on the previous slide, the CRT and CLT. If you leave your property that your kids will inherit, and because if you don't put it in the CRT or CLT to go to charity organization, how much percentage of the inherited income or the property goes to the government versus nothing if you go to the 501c3?
So the question was asked, again, if you don't go ahead and put your assets into a CRT or a CLT, and upon your passing, how much can the government get, or will the government take it, or will it go directly? Again, those are inheritance questions. Again, I think earlier, a few months ago, we had seminars on wills and trusts. Right? We should all have a will. We should all have a trust in terms of how our assets are managed upon our passing, and how much, again, if you want it Sharia compliant, how much you can give away. I believe the hadith says up to 1/3, right? And that is the max, and even that is not recommended. But again, up to 1/3 is what we could go ahead and bequest to non-for-profits, according to our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hadith, right? But again, so if you don't have certain proper documentation, wills or anything, then it goes to probate court and everything, and the government can go ahead and take it and potentially not give it to your children, or give it to your children after many hurdles. Other questions? Any questions online?
So in the previous slide, right, on the IRS, so let's say if someone has 100K in their account and he wants to give 30% to two kids and 30% to masjid. So upon his passing, are the kids going to still pay the taxes on their 30%?
Yes. So the question was, again, if I have $100,000 in my IRA, and upon my passing, I write in my will, I want 30% to go to my children, 30% to go to my son, 30 to my daughter, and 30 to the masjid, do my children still have to pay taxes on 30%? Yes. Right? Again, the children will go ahead and pay taxes on whatever they inherit. There's a question on online that says, can the school donation be made by anyone, or only if your kids are going to that particular school? No, anyone can go ahead and make the donation. You can go ahead and have it to, I think that's the Invest in Kids program that they're talking about. It can go to any one of the schools. Again, I think there's maybe about, when I did the search last time, there's about 8 or 10 Islamic schools from Chicagoland, as well as all the way down to Carbondale and Springfield as well. This one's on YouTube. What's on Slido? If you can. Can my school donation be made to anyone, or simply if my child attends? I think I answered that. Does the organization have to be a 501c3 in order to get the deduction? Yes. Right? In order for you to go ahead and get a tax deduction, you have to be a 501c3, right? That's why, again, if you want to go ahead and donate to overseas or anything, then you create your own 501c3 as a vehicle.
Their foundation is set up to help the U.S. Through the foundation, they help or donate organizations who actually register to help their organization in India. So how it works, like, so can like a donation that's set up here, that is a 501, but their goal is to help India.
So what's the question?
Foundations that set up, can they donate to an organization like that?
Yes. So the question is, if you have your own 501c3, can you donate to another 501c3? Yes. Again, you get the tax deduction once you put into the 501c3, right? What the 501c3 does with it, as long as they're following their mission and their bylaws and everything, they can go ahead and donate to another 501c3 or a non-501c3, it doesn't matter, right? But the minute you put in that, step one is your money has to go into a 501c3 on day one. If that goes into the first vehicle as a 501c3, then you get the tax deduction. What happens after that is irrelevant.
I missed the initial part of this conversation, but like if you're filing personal tax return, is there a minimum amount of tax, like for organization that you have to meet to waive those?
So the question is, again, she missed the earlier part of the presentation, is there a minimum amount that you need to go ahead and donate in order to go ahead and get benefits from tax deduction? Yes, you have to itemize on your tax return. In order for you to itemize, you have to cross the standard threshold. For single individuals, it's approximately 14,000. For married, approximately 28,000, right? And in order for you to itemize, three main things. Does anyone remember what those three things were? Property tax, mortgage interest, and donations. Three things. Correct.
But they took away the property tax deduction.
Up to $10,000. State income tax and property tax combined is up to $10,000. It is. I believe it's being live streamed on YouTube, and it will be on the ISNS YouTube link afterwards.
YouTube channel.
We don't have any other questions, inshallah. I am good. Jazakallah khair. Go ahead.
Okay, one more question. So in your example, right, with the small NFTs probably, people who are sending money overseas for parent support or sibling support, right? And let's say they spend like 12,000 a year, right? And if they put in a small NFP, can they use that money to send overseas?
So again, the question is, if you have a small NFP, can you send money overseas? Yes. Again, as long as one of the things is the NFP can't be set up to benefit a private individual on day one, right? So one of the requirements of the IRS is you can't say, hey, I want to open up a NFP to support my children's education, right? So I'm going to go ahead and donate to my 501c3, and that 501c3 is going to pay my children's higher education and college tuition fees. No, right? It can't be open to benefit a particular individual or individuals, right? It's got to just be somewhat generic, right? Jazakallah khairan. I appreciate everyone coming out. If you have any questions, I'll be around. If not, again, thank you for your time. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. वो बंद कर दो आप पहले
नहीं नहीं